it was you, Sila, that threw apples.
Oh God,
Nikki.
It's a good
I can
weapon
remember
of
it.
choice.
I can remember it vividly to this day, but it was a long time ago.
And it is
my
the
goodness.
only time in our marriage of 45 and a half years that Scylla has thrown anything at me. And I seriously upset her.
Welcome to On Leadership, a midweek podcast from HTVV. We believe leadership is a posture, not a position, and in the same way postures can be improved, leaders can grow. We want to encourage you to keep going and to equip you with practical ways to grow as a leader. Thanks for tuning in to On Leadership.
Hey, welcome to On Leadership. We're your hosts for this episode. I'm Abel.
And I'm Jacinta.
And we have two really exciting guests to be chatting with us today on a topic that has been top of mind for many people in this season. We're talking about how to work through conflict today. And with us, we have Nicky and Sila.
Boop, boop, boop. Nicky and Sila, so good
Great
to have
be
you
with
on
you
this
so
podcast.
It's wonderful to be with you and have this opportunity to chat.
So good.
Oh,
How
thank
are
you.
you guys? What's it like in the UK right now?
We are really well, thank you. A lot of the rules around COVID have been relaxed. We don't have to wear face masks. We can sing again. We can
So
sing in
good.
church again. We can meet each other, see each other's faces. That's a
Yeah.
great bonus.
Yeah, it's still winter time. It should be spring, but it's pretty
Yeah,
grey outside.
It's quite cold.
Quite cold. So we wish we were in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And we love having you guys come to Malaysia. We've missed you guys these past few years and would love to have you back soon. Nicky and Sila, you guys are pastors at HTB in London. You're pioneers of the family life courses, which include the marriage course, the pre-marriage course, parenting children course, and parenting teenagers
Lots of
course.
courses.
You've been married for 46 years, I think. And
This
you
year,
have
this
46 in July.
In July.
45
in July.
and a half.
Wow.
You need a trophy for
You-
that.
Amazing. And you guys have 4 children, and am I right in thinking 8 grandchildren?
Nearly 10 now.
Nearly 10
Wow.
now. That's amazing.
Nine and one expected.
9 and
The
3/4.
10th in June expected.
Wow.
Oh, congratulations.
That's a lot of layers of relationships. And you probably have a lot of experience working through conflict or helping people work through conflict. So you guys are the perfect people to be speaking to us on this today.
Yeah, at a time like this, at the time of this recording especially, so much of our news feed has been filled with conflict. There's a heartbreaking war happening in Europe right now. So many people are going through this sort of strange post-pandemic season globally. People are, going through the strains of working from home. There are COVID disruptions. We've just come out of a 10-day
10 days
home isolation
with a toddler.
quarantine with a 2-year-old. It just means that people are more tense and stressed in this season. And it almost feels as if everywhere is a hotbed for conflict right now. And I suppose our first question to you is, what would you say to someone who is overwhelmed right now in dealing with conflict?
I think the first thing we would say is you're not alone. It is, and of course, it is a normal part of human relationships, whether that is in friendships, whether it's at work, whether it's in a marriage relationship,
Child parent.
Disagreement and conflict are normal because we are all different. We're made differently. We think differently. We have different personalities. And as you say, at a season like this, where we may well be struggling with a lot of different things, that can lead to greater conflict. And I think one of the things that we would say is we need to talk about what we're feeling. And so much conflict happens because we suppress those feelings, or we don't communicate those feelings to another person. We try to cope on our own struggle, and that leads to more conflict. So the key to conflict is being able to talk about it.
And isolation. I think we all kind of understand that word now much more fully, having been through a pandemic, where isolation before was sort of like an unusual thing. Now it's like we know what isolation feels like now. And isolation is not a healthy thing for people. And because life revolves around relationships. And that, I just reiterate what Nicky says, that to recognize isolation will make it worse.
Yeah. And we've done the marriage course a couple of times now.
It's wonderful.
We love it. It's been so good. And one of our favorite stories about conflict that you guys talk about, I think involves throwing apples to one another. I think it was you, Sila, that threw apples.
Oh God,
It's a
I
good
can
weapon
remember
of
it.
choice.
I can remember it vividly to this day, but it was a long time ago.
And it is
my
the
goodness.
only time in our marriage of 45 and a half years that Scylla has thrown anything at me. And I seriously upset her, more so than I realized actually before she threw the apples.
What was that your worst conflict?
I would say, well, we were thinking about talking about conflict, I would say the first sort of 18 months of our marriage, we had a lot of conflict because I came into marriage really without a good, healthy model of how to resolve conflict. So I mean, my parents were together for 52 years, very loving family and all the rest, but absolutely didn't know how to handle hurt when they hurt each other and upset each other. There would be a lot of volatility, shouting, slamming of doors, getting in moods.
Sometimes for 48 hours, people not talking to each other.
So I didn't know what it looked like to actually handle conflict in a healthy way. So poor Nicky, the first 18 months of our marriage, it was quite volatile, me storming around, getting into moods, blah, blah, blah.
I wasn't very good at talking about what I felt. If I was upset and hurt, I would tend to suppress it and push it down and not tell Scylla. Scylla had no idea that I was upset about things. So that wasn't very healthy for our marriage either. But
the encouraging thing is, and I mean, I want to say this particularly personally, I have learned how to handle conflict better. And I think the encouraging thing is we all can. There are some relationship tools that we can all learn. And obviously being self-aware of how we respond when we're getting upset and so on and angry is very important. And the apple throwing story was because we just had our first child, and she was about 4 months old, and I was
incredibly stressful.
I was tired, waking up at night. I mean, we were and I just felt that Nicky said something, and I just sort of flipped because I tried to explain to him I hadn't got it. He hadn't got it. And I just thought he doesn't get it. And so my mode of operandi, if I'm not understood and I'm hurt, is to go on the attack. So I just picked up the nearest thing to me.
There happened to be rather a large basket full of apples right where she was standing, and she started throwing them at me, and I was sort of ducking down behind the sofa, trying to avoid the apples flying across the room until the basket was empty. Then I could sort of re-emerge and we could talk about it.
It slightly alarmed me that I did that, but I realized we kind of understood a lot from that incident. And since then, I mean, obviously, if anybody listening has done the marriage course, we talk about ways of handling anger and how all of us need to learn to handle anger appropriately. And there's a phrase that we talk about often, we come back to. There is a healthy a way to handle anger. Anger is not wrong in itself, but the wrong and unhealthy ways, one is to go more aggressive and go on the attack. The other is to suppress and to bottle. And neither of those two extremes are at all healthy and can cause real problems in relationships. But the way that is healthy is expression, but in a pleasant, controlled, articulating what you're feeling way. That is how you can handle it.
And I think the honest truth is, I don't think Scylla and I have fewer disagreements now. We had a lot of disagreements when we were first married. We still have disagreements. I think it's just that we've got better at how to handle them.
That's very encouraging.
The years, we've
That's
learned,
so helpful.
sometimes painfully.
And I think that the magic is in the way you express it, because, like you guys said, the feelings will be there, the disagreements will be there, but you just get better at how to communicate what those are.
Yeah.
And when to communicate too. I don't think we were good at doing that. Choosing the right moment to bring something up that one or other of us is upset about or disagrees about. That makes a huge difference. And sometimes the right place. You know, I think sometimes when you're sort of sitting face to face, that's not so easy. I remember one couple saying that they found it so much easier to, if they were walking together, they were walking side by side, they could have much better discussions about things where they disagreed.
Right.
Some people find, and I think we find this actually, long car journeys. I know car journeys can be stressful for people, so I don't want to recommend this necessarily. But equally, if
especially in Malaysian traffic.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
fair
Yes.
enough.
Where you get even more tensed
Yeah.
and riled up.
I'm talking about driving through the English
A
countryside. for a long
leisurely
Yeah.
ride.
ride.
But
With
you're sitting
beautiful
side by
greens
side.
and
Right.
pastures and flowers.
Exactly. It's more soothing, so that you can talk about an issue and think more carefully about what you feel. And of course, an absolute key is listening to each other, rather than just putting our point of view. And of course, you know, one of the hazards of conflict is we are very keen that the other person, whether it's our friend, our colleague, or a husband or wife, we're very keen that they understand our point of view, but very often we're not quite so keen to understand theirs. An absolute key to resolving conflict is listening. Listening is absolutely essential. Listening to what they feel. And sometimes that means even drawing them out, getting more of it. And so often, I think, when somebody feels heard and understood, then the conflict is over, actually. They're happy then because the other person understands them.
Yeah, I think that is very important in any relationship, that, you know, that you're getting to be around someone a lot of time, whether that is someone at work or a parent or a friend, is seeking to understand them. And it's not just about between a husband and wife. Of course, we must seek to understand a husband or wife better over the years and years and years. But that's the same with any relationship. And, you know, some things in people who are even really good friends of ours can really annoy us about them, you know, and it triggers something. And actually, it's both a thing of being self-aware about why is it triggering it in me, but also a kind of understanding about why they are reacting in this way or saying this or whatever. And I know with friends that actually I've had to find ways to accommodate that, when actually it wouldn't be the way I would work. It wouldn't be the way that I would think about something, but I know that that's the way they are and that's how they like it. You know, somebody's very into routine and they have to stick with a particular routine. I find that very strange because I like going with the flow, being a bit more flexible, but actually to accommodate to that can diffuse a lot of conflict.
I've completely forgotten the author of that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You'll know
Stephen Covey. Yeah.
I remember one of his phrases is seek first to understand, then to be understood.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Good.
Do you want to flesh that out a little bit, Nikki? Because that's such a helpful phrase.
Well, I think it goes back partially to what we were saying about the importance of listening. And I think the longer we've known somebody, whether that's a family member, whether it's a husband or wife or a colleague or a friend, the longer we've known somebody, the more we think we know what they feel or what their values are, their views are, etc. And so we're trying to persuade them of ours. But actually, the truth is, so often we don't know. And there's that wonderful proverb in the Bible: a person's thoughts are a deep well. And of course, there's no end of drawing someone out, finding out what they think and feel. That, of course, is an absolute key to relationships generally, but it's an absolute key as well to resolving conflict. And that drawing and that understanding them involves the listening. It also involves asking them questions. You know, if you're able to ask the right questions that the other person feels they can answer and draws them out, that makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And conflicts get resolved to the point at which not only is there no disagreement, but actually you end up closer to the other person
That's
because you've
so
understood
good.
them better.
That's so encouraging, because basically what you're saying, Nikki, is that conflict can be an opportunity for connection.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
but
that's
I
so
think,
good.
I think Jacinta, in that situation, and I mean, we talk about this on with the pre-marriage and marriage, particularly with a couple, you know, we are inevitably going to upset and hurt each other. Some are very small hurts and upsets that we're not intending to. Others are much bigger, particularly if it's an act of sort of unfaithfulness or something like that. And actually, when that comes out into the open, when there is then the kind of reality of looking at what's happened, and one person takes ownership and says, I am so sorry, I was wrong, I'm so sorry I've hurt you, and the other person is able to choose to forgive, that when that really genuinely happens, then actually the couple afterwards are closer, because that opening up to, you can't hide anymore, it's total vulnerability. And it's where there's broken trust, that's the way that trust is restored. And when trust is restored like that, with keeping no record of past wrongs, but true forgiveness and restoration, then you're closer and it's stronger. And that's why it's a kind of habit and a pattern of living that we have to cultivate to go on and to keep, you know, very short record of any misunderstandings and upsets and hurts. And we've seen it. I mean, we've known it ourselves in our own marriage. We've seen it with many, many couples. And
you'll know this analogy that if you break a bone, I thankfully, praise God, I've never broken a bone. I don't think I've broken a bone. Anyway, I'll try to live all my life without breaking a bone. I don't know if I'll succeed or not. But one of the things I heard was that if you break a bone, the place where the bone mends, that is becomes the strongest part of the bone. So you won't break that bit again very easily. You might break another bit of the bone, but not that bit. And I think it's a wonderful picture of what Sila has said.
Yes.
Where there has been hurt, where you are able to come back together closely, actually you can be stronger together as a result.
Yes. I love that you've talked about hope in conflict, that conflict can lead to further strength. And I love what you said earlier, Sila, about how it really starts with awareness, self-awareness, awareness of the other person, and then accommodating and making adjustments. Nikki, you then talked about seeking to understand. My question is about the role of power in conflicts, where sometimes power distance might make it a little more tricky to perhaps ask questions. Do you have any advice for, maybe people who are feeling less powerful in a relationship dynamic? We're thinking about maybe
like workplace
relationships
with your manager, or like in multi-generational homes in Malaysia, which we have many of.
Maybe a parent and a child, where there's an obvious difference in role and age. Do you have any advice for people who are feeling perhaps less powerful in times of conflict? How can they do those things?
That's such a good and very important question that you ask, because there are many relationships that all of us will be involved in where there is a disparity between the power of one person and the other. And I think for the less powerful person,
Can I just say something? Before? I think it's really helpful while we're talking about the sort of more powerful, less powerful. I think there are two unhelpful positions, and I just want to put them out there at the beginning as we talk, that in any relationship, if there is control and coercion, that is an abuse of a relationship. Where there is a victim mentality, that is also a manipulation of a relationship. And those two, again, it's like aggression and suppression. They're kind of two ends of a spectrum. And neither of those are healthy situations, whether you're the powerful one or whether you're the less powerful position. And so I think it's really helpful to bear those in mind, that neither of those are where we want to be.
Yeah. And I think if you're the less powerful person in a relationship, the temptation is to avoid or at least to avoid talking to the person who is the more powerful one. And what people sometimes tend to do is talk about them. They talk about them to everybody else because, and then they may manipulate, they may use what's described in psychological terms as passive aggressive behavior, i.e. through their behavior, they try to make it clear that they're upset and really this person hasn't either treated them well or they disagree with what they're doing. And that neither of those are helpful. Just talking about the other person, but not talking to them. And ultimately, and this often takes real courage, it's being able to talk to the person with whom we have the disagreement, the conflict, the hurt, or whatever it is. But in doing that, it is so important that you do it in a controlled way. Yes. And to do it in a controlled way means that you do it in a calm way, a less emotional way. And when I say not talking about the person, not talking to them rather than about them, you sometimes you need to rehearse what you're going to say to the person. So you might have a friend you can go to and say, this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I want to say.
You're really identifying the issue.
Yes.
I think that's very, very key. You yourself need to be clear about what is the issue of disagreement and to be rational about that rather than allowing it to sort of widen into something that's so impacted by your emotions, you aren't being very rational about it. And sorry, can I just continue on this, that I think one of the most helpful things to remember is it's very easy to get either very defensive or to get very like blaming or accusatory. And actually the very best antidote to that is to use I statements. And when you've identified the issue, then you talk about that, but from a perspective of, this is how I feel about this. So you're not immediately putting the other person as to the, it's all your fault. It's blaming, accusing, and all of that, which immediately puts the other person on the defense. You're just expressing what you feel the issue is, and you're doing it all the time using I statements.
And sometimes it's a help to rehearse that with somebody else first. If you're talking to somebody who's more powerful, sometimes it helps to write things down. Writing down often helps to clarify our thoughts and our feelings, and to think very carefully about what we're going to say. But at the end of the day, if I can boil all of that down, it's talk to the person, not just about them.
That's so helpful. And it's basically getting it out of your head and speaking it with your mouth. So you're not sort of suffering in isolation, like what we sort of started talking about at the very start. We want to end here with one final question, Nicky and Sila. We remember that you've once described marriage as a place in which you're sometimes forced to love one another well. And I wonder if this applies to, families, your sibling relationships.
You're forced to love each other well because you're living together. And you almost, if you don't do that well, then actually
it affects your quality of life.
It becomes a nightmare.
Yeah. And in this part of the world, it's quite common to live in a multi-generational home. So in many ways, you kind of have to work through that. We also know that in Asia, we have the longest working hours globally. So again, you spend so much time with your co-workers.
You're sort of locked in with your colleagues.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could just end with some practical tips on how to deal with conflict.
Whoa, big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Basically, how to end wars.
May we just run through 5 steps that we often use. We go back to them. We use them on the marriage course, the pre-marriage course, and these I think have been very helpful to people. We've mentioned some of them already, so we'll just give the headings of some of them. And the first one is what Sila said earlier about identify what the issue is and focus on that rather than allowing it to widen into everything else. Think, what is the central issue that is causing this conflict that you are upset about? A second step is, again, what Sila's talked about, using I statements when you're doing that. Talk about what you feel. Third step is be sure to listen to each other, that I talked about earlier. And, when we listen, one very helpful little tool that we've discovered is reflecting back what the other person has said. And that does two things. When they, particularly if we're in a sort of conflict, might have gone on for a while, or it raises really strong feelings. If the other person is spoken, if you say back to them, you reflect back what they've said, particularly any emotions they've expressed, it first of all helps you to know if you've understood what they've said. And if you haven't understood, they can say it again. But secondly, it helps them to feel understood. And again, as we said earlier, it's when, let me put it a different way. Understanding is more important than agreement. And it's where people understand each other, even if they may have different views.
Yes.
Then they can work together happily. They can live together happily. They can move forward together happily. And I think that's a key part of conflict. Understanding is more important than agreement. When people grasp that and live it, they tend to live with much better relationships. But having said that, when you've done those first three steps, focusing on the issue, using I statements, listening to each other, then you can start to look for solutions to problems. And sometimes it's really helpful, and we know this in our own marriage, just brainstorm different solutions. Sometimes just write down a list of all the different ways that you could resolve this.
And I just want to come in here, because I think a very big part of the kind of finding solutions to situations will be this thing of putting in healthy boundaries. And boundaries can seem like a sort of very jargon type word, but actually it just means being aware that we all have the ability to make choices and to prioritize where relationships are concerned, and we have to, and we must. And I think in the situation you describe of being, living in 3 generations, of long working hours, of etc., expectations, parents, children, all of that stuff, actually boundaries are important, but also respect, and to express it's out of respect and love that we put in boundaries, and that is a healthy thing. And I mean, it's completely it's essential for good relationships. And I just remember, I'll just give an example of a husband and wife where there was a father whose wife had died, and he was on his own. He was about 75, living on his own in another country. And this couple, they just got married, and the father would ring up his son, who was the husband, every day, but the timing was really bad. He would ring and talk to his son for about an hour or longer sometimes, just when this man had got in from work in the evening.
Were sitting down for their evening meal,
and they were sitting down to eat a meal together. And so he would then have, all his emotional kind of time, and everything would be poured into his father. And his wife found it increasingly more and more difficult. And she kind of felt bad because her father-in-law was on his own and Anyway, but in the end, she had to say to her husband, I am finding this really, really difficult. I'm finding it very hurtful because I think you think your relationship with your father is more important than with me, etc. And they had a very good talk about it. And they realized they had to find a solution to this. And they decided that actually the father could ring the son at a better time during the day, in the son's lunch hour, and not in the evening. And that would work. And so the son had to then broach that subject with the father, which he said was very, very, very difficult.
Right.
Because he felt bad. He felt like I'm sort of disrespecting my father. But he did, and he explained, you know, it's because I care about you. I want to hear, but I also need to give my time to my wife when I get home. And anyway, so they tried this new thing of him ringing at lunch, and sometimes he got it, sometimes he'd get it wrong again. But actually, after about a few weeks, he actually got hold of it. And the interesting thing was hearing the wife talk about how different it was for them. She said it totally changed everything in terms of the husband and wife relationship. She realized her husband really, you know, cared about her and she felt valued. But also, she said, the interesting thing is she was feeling very resentful towards her father-in-law. And actually, it turned that right around. And she said our relationship actually got better. And I wanted to talk to him and wanted to see him when we could see him and all of that stuff. And so that is what is important when you're looking for solutions. It's knowing that there's a right boundary. He needed to spend that quality time when he got home having dinner with his wife. And that was the top priority. That doesn't mean to say his relationship with his father goes out the window. No, he loved his father. He cared about his father. He respected his father. They could find a solution to make that also a really good relationship.
So I think that's the fourth step, looking for a solution. That's a really good example.
Very good.
And then the last part, which I think is also very important, when you try a solution, you try it out, you see if it works. And if it works like that one, then the conflict is over. You're closer together as a result of what you've talked about. But if it doesn't work, you're prepared to look for something different. And I think that helps people in relationships. You're recognizing it. We're always in the process of trying things out. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. But we can come back and look again, try and find a better solution this time.
I love that last step as well, because if we were to think like judges, you know, basically just making decisions and sentences about our solutions, then you're always bound to, you know, either have a right decision or a wrong decision. But if you think like a scientist, it's an experiment.
It's fluid.
That's a great analogy.
Good analogy.
Yes. I love that.
The other thing I want to say, because I'm thinking about wider family, and I have a quite challenging relationship with one member of my wider family, and it's been for years. And it's kind of easy to give up and to write off a relationship and say, no, it's never going to be different. It's never going to change. That's just who they are. That's, you know, whatever. And actually, over, you know, a long time now, I have really worked on this relationship. There have been times when I've felt very despairing about it and thought, this is impossible. But I have kept persevering. And again, I've found trying to think what would make this person respond better has really worked. So when we're together and we're having conversations, which is difficult because I am someone who can talk very, very easily. And this other person doesn't talk very easily at all. And I've had to really work at thinking about the things that other person wants to talk about and not just think about what I can talk about. And the things are so different. Our lives are so different that it's like really challenging for me. And but I just have to say it's got better, and I'm so glad I've persevered, because that's the whole point, that we want to remain in relationship. We don't want to be what's the word?
Apart, falling out?
Yeah, no, there's another word.
Separated?
No, it's not separated. Not in relationship anyway. And we all can keep going. And keep learning and keep understanding better and keep trying different things. And there's always hope, I think.
Well, on that note, of hope. I want to thank you. We want to thank you so much for your time, Nicky and Sila. It's been so helpful. It's been really hopeful as well. And, you know, we're hoping that for our listeners, you found this really helpful as well, because it has been for us.
So helpful for us. I think we have
Good.
learned so much just in this episode as well, just chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for all your wisdom.
Wonderful to
Fantastic.
talk to you. Thank you.
Great. It's been wonderful. Thanks for having us.
Till next time, God bless.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to On Leadership. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, why not share it with a friend or post it on social media? Whatever platform you're listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow, and turn on your notifications to receive more great content from HTBV.